I have to apologize for my voice. I think every little piece of pollen in North Carolina has decided to come and live in my throat. I'm doing all the homeopathic things I can find, but I apologize for it. Now, I have to preface this story by telling you that my birth name, my maiden name, is McMahon. And for the time anyone could remember anything, everyone called my father Mac, including his children. So when I refer in this story to Mac, I am indeed talking about my biological father, Ralph W. McMahon. Now, the summer between my sophomore and junior year in high school, my good friend Jimmy Parker went fishing in the Saluda River. About midday, he looked up and he saw a beat-up old brown Samsonite suitcase floating along on the current. Well, it was a hot day and the fish weren't biting, so Jimmy decided that he would investigate. He swam out and he pulled that suitcase to shore, and you can imagine his surprise when he opened that suitcase and inside there was a small, fuzzy, black and brown puppy with dark chocolate brown eyes. Now, he knew his parents would never let him have a dog, so he brought that puppy to my house, where my parents fell immediately in love with that dog, and my mother promptly named it Moses. Now, Moses did not stay a small little puppy. He grew to be about 55, 60 pounds, and even though he was a short-haired dog, we did not have to check Ancestry.com to realize that there was some terrier back in the gene pool, because sticking out all over his body at random points were long tufts of curly hair. And those chocolate brown eyes, well, they turned a color that my father always referred to as warm beer yellow. But beauty is in the eyes of the beholder. My parents loved that dog, and they carried it with them almost everywhere they went. Now, Moses gave us a great deal of joy over many, many years. He also introduced us to some really interesting people. Now, the couple of years before Moses came into our lives, my parents had purchased a piece of property on a small, undeveloped island off the South Carolina coast. 2 years after I graduated from high school, the bridge was completed from the island over to the mainland, and my parents built a beach house. They went down to the island almost every weekend, and of course, they took Moses with them. Shortly after their house was finished, the second phase of the development of the island went into effect. There was a little creek that meandered behind their house, and the second phase involved dredging out that creek to be wide enough and deep enough to accommodate small pleasure boats. And to that end, they parked a huge zillion-ton iron dredging machine out in the marshland behind and just off to the right of my parents' house. Now, Mac always got up early when they were at the beach and let Mama sleep in. One morning, it was one of those cold, foggy, sleety, rainy, awful, miserable winter beach mornings. Mac got up and let Moses out and started making some coffee. Well, he had just getting ready to pour his first cup of coffee, and there was a knock at the door. And he opened it up, and there stood a strange man with Moses. The man introduced himself as Bob Sutton and said he was the dredge operator and asked if this was our dog. Well, my dad stood there for a minute, and he couldn't think of a single thing that Moses could have done to damage a huge zillion-ton iron dredging machine, so he admitted that it was our dog. Bob said, well, I had just come to work, and this dog came up, and he said, Bob, he said, you look half frozen and half hung over. And you see that house over there with the light on? There's a man over there making coffee, and I'd be willing to bet you that he'd give you a cup of coffee to warm you up. Well, Mac stood there for a minute, and he looked at Moses, and he looked at Bob, and looked down at Moses, and, well, he didn't want to make a liar out of his dog. So he invited Bob in to have a cup of coffee. Well, they chatted and drank their coffee, and just about the time Mac was getting ready to pour them the second cup of coffee, Bob looked down and said, "No, Moses, I can't do that." "Well, I know that, Moses, but you live here. I'm a guest." What did Moses say? My dad asked, and Bob said, now, Mac, this isn't me. This is Moses. But he said that you had something in one of these cabinets up here that we could put in our coffee to sweeten it up a bit that would keep these old bones warm the rest of the day. Well, once again, Mac didn't want to make a liar out of his dog, so he went over to the liquor cabinet and pulled out a bottle of bourbon and sweetened up their coffee. About an hour later, my mother woke up, and she went in, and sitting at the kitchen was her husband and a strange man, neither one of them feeling any pain whatsoever. Now, we were glad that Moses introduced us to Bob because he was a vital and important part of our lives for years down on the island. And you may find this hard to believe, but there are a whole lot of Bob Sutton stories, but I'll save those for another day. Back to Moses. Now, fast forward a number of years, my dad has had several heart attacks, and he cannot drive. But that's okay. He doesn't mind that, except when it comes to getting a haircut. He will not allow my mother to drive him to the barber shop as if he were a little boy. However, the problem is solved because right near our house, they built a brand new, modern strip mall. And in that strip mall, there just happened to be a barber shop. So Mac would go with Mama when she went shopping sometimes, and he'd say, well, as long as we're here, I'll just get a haircut. And, of course, they took Moses with them on all of these excursions. Well, one day the shopping was over, the haircut was completed, and the three of them were walking back to the car. Coming across the parking lot was a young couple, and they stopped in front of my parents, and the young man said, well, hello, Moses, how are you? And they petted the dog, and they scratched him behind the ears and made over him. And the young woman actually leaned over and kissed that dog on the nose. They stood up and nodded at my parents and walked off. Well, my mother could tell that this encounter upset my dad. By the time they got home, he was fuming. Ralph, what is wrong with you? It's that blasted Moses. What did Moses do? All these years, we fed that dog, we gave him fresh water, we take him to the vet when he's sick, we take him with us everywhere we go, we even take him down to the beach, and he doesn't have the common courtesy to introduce us to his friends. My mother said, oh, Ralph, Moses is getting old. He probably just forgot their names. Well, I think my dad was mollified a bit, but I'm not sure he ever totally forgave Moses for his incredible breach of manners. My first ex-brother-in-law and I got along quite well. And one of the things that we shared was sort of a somewhat offbeat sense of humor. And that sense of humor sort of played itself out in the gifts that we gave each other. Our birthdays were about a month apart, his in October, mine's in November. Well, for instance, now Harry was, as they say, to the manor born. Silver spoon, ponies, private schools, that whole thing. So for his birthday one year, I got him a subscription to a farming magazine. For my birthday one year, now this was the 60s, I was amassing every single protest folk album I could possibly afford. I was having a great collection, Kingston Trio, Peter, Paul, and Mary. And Harry gave me a Hank Williams album. Do I have to explain to anybody who Hank Williams is? Well, my freshman year in college, of course, I was broke, and I sent Harry a telegram that said, Harry, baby, we'll send lavish gift when lavish funds available. And I signed it Little One, because that was Harry's nickname for me. Because at the time, I weighed 98 pounds, dripping wet with rocks in my pocket, and had absolutely no figure to speak of. Well, when my birthday came in November, Harry sent me, with I know the approval and information from my sister, a pair of white silk Playboy bunny panties. Now, we're not talking thongs or bikinis here. We are talking what would be called today granny panties, but they were white silk, and they had that pink Playboy bunny emblem stamped all over them. I had never owned a pair of silk panties. I felt so very sophisticated when I wore them. Now, in January, I was invited to be a counselor at a Young Life ski camp up in Gatlinburg. Now, I grew up, for those of you who may not know, Young Life is an interdenominational Christian organization for high school kids. I'd been active all through my high school years. Well, as soon as I found out I didn't have to know how to ski in order to be a counselor, I accepted. Well, the Friday night mixer, I met this really cute guy from UNC Chapel Hill. And he said to me, "You do ski, don't you?" And I said, "Sure." I mean, I could water ski. How different could it possibly be? So we made an appointment to meet at the top of the intermediate hill the next morning and ski. Well, it only took me, 8 days to get my skis on. And I got up to the top of the hill. They tell me I made 2 perfect turns before the crash. I tried to stand up, and there was excruciating pain from my left knee to all points north, south, east, and west. So I laid back down. See, my plan was I would just lay there, and it would snow on top of me, and I would be one of those little bumps that people skied over, and I wouldn't have to deal with any of these people until fall, until spring. Well, I did not count on the ski patrol. He came smooshing up, or whatever that word is, and did one of those turns, where the snow fans out, and he snapped his skis off and crossed them in the snow just up the hill from me, and at this point, I hated him a lot. And he said, "I've called a stretcher to get you down to the first aid shack." And I looked him right in the eye, and I said, "I got up this mountain by myself. I will get down this mountain by myself." And I proceeded to stand up. I regained consciousness back in the first aid shack, where the nurse was taking all my vital signs. Everything was fine. And she said to me, "Let's get those blue jeans off of you before your knee swells up so much that we have to cut them off." I was wearing my white silk Playboy bunny panties. Well, we got the jeans off, and she gave me one of those sheets to wrap around my waist, and I was wrapping around my waist, and she said, "Oh, my word, honey, those are the cutest panties I have ever seen in my life. I have never seen panties that cute. I declare those." And about this time, the doctor walked in, and she said, "Doctor, you have got to see these panties." Well, spoiler alert, she did not humiliate me at all. She just opened that sheet up a little, about this far, on the side, so that he could see the pattern. And she said, "You have got to tell me where you got those panties." I couldn't tell her they were a gift from my brother-in-law. I mean, that just sounded creepy. So I said the first thing that came to my mind. I said, Mr. Hefner gave all of us bunnies a pair of these for Christmas this year. Well, they took a couple of steps back and looked at me from head to toe and toe to head, and all three of us had a really good laugh. So the moral of the story is, your mama was right. Always wear clean underwear because you never know when you're going to get into an accident. And I will tell you, if you do get into an accident, you have a much better story if you happen to be wearing white silk Playboy bunny panties.